Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Now let's welcome our main speaker for tonight, and it's Frank C. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Frank C. and I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank Justin for asking me to come and share, and thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege to be asked to do this, and I want to thank Lewis. I want to congratulate all the CHIP people, say happy birthday, and say what an honor. I always say it's an honor and a privilege to be asked to do this. You know, my sponsor was quick to remind me when I was new that speaking's probably the least significant commitment I could have in AA. He said that making a coffee back there or setting up that literature or cleaning the room up afterwards or setting it up in the beginning, these kinds of commitments kept me coming back to the same place week after week, whether I wanted to be there or not. Speaking, you know, it's like I hadn't been to this meeting in probably 4 or 5 years, and I won't be back for probably 4 or 5 years. I come in here, I run my mouth about me for 30 minutes, and get the heck out of Dodge, you know. That'll get you drunk, man. What kind of commitment is that? You know, it's like, that's dangerous for an alcoholic. And so I got to remind myself, and besides that, I got to really remind myself that I had to get 2.5 years sobriety before I could ever remember hearing a speaker. When I was new, I was so messed up, I couldn't remember what was beyond about 3 feet in front of my nose. If you're new and you think my hand's shaking, you're seeing things. It gets better. That's just a joke. I want to welcome the newcomers, and there's a lot of them in here, and I'm an alcoholic, and I got Parkinson's. And this was diagnosed about 7 years ago. My sobriety date is December 20th, 1982. So by the grace of God, what is this, about a week and a half, I'll have 23 years. That's pretty cool. That's a long time between drinks for a drunk like me. But first thing Doc asked me when I showed up with this trimmer, I said, Doc, my hand's shaking. And he goes, he says, well, how does it respond to alcohol? I said, well, he didn't know me too good, you know, so I mean, he'd ask that question. So I guess my hand needs a drink, you know. It's like, I feel like that Peter Sellers movie where he had that hand that would like attack him, and it calms down, it comes and goes. My friend Milton says, don't sit next to me when I'm eating soup. You can watch it shake or listen to what I have to say, or both. It doesn't matter to me. But it's the least of what's wrong with me. Trust me, this is the least of what's wrong with me. This is a problem of abundance compared to who I should be, what I should be doing, where I should be. 6 feet in the ground is where I should be. You know, so I'm on borrowed time here, and it's the least of what's wrong with me. I'm here to talk about my number one issue, which is my alcoholism. And if I don't, you know, make it my number one issue, it will make drugs and alcohol my number one issue. and which destroys me and you along the way. And I never knew what my number one issue was before I got here. I never knew what was first. And that's what this program has taught me. The reason I say it's an honor and a privilege to be asked to participate is because I was useless when I got here. I was a useless human being. I was in the way. I heard a guy at an architect's meeting, my friend Lewis, I want to thank him. Lewis had like a year and a half, and I thought he was real cool and on a pedestal when I met him because I was brand new. He had a year and a half. The last 23 years, I have methodically been taking him down off that pedestal, realizing he's really not that cool. And no, he is. He's cool. We've been good buddies, and we met in that architect's room. We both discovered our priorities together. I got it. Yeah, we both discovered our priorities together. And we met in that architect's room, and like I say, there was a guy there who used to describe it as a dog on a freeway. He said he felt like a dog on a freeway. And I thought I related to that so well. I could just see. I'm from Southeast Texas originally, and there were plenty of times you'd be driving home at night, you see a deer in the headlights or a dog on a freeway or a possum crossing the road looking at you. And that was the kind of terror I felt. I related to that. It's a road hazard. It's in the way. It's not supposed to be there. Dogs got no business being on a freeway, you know, and that's useless. It renders one useless, that kind of terror and that kind of fear. I had nothing to give. If I had had anything, I wouldn't have been interested in giving it. I lived in a dog-eat-dog hostile world. There was nothing about love or service in it, and I didn't even know that at the time. That renders one useless. Anything I have that's of any value, anything that I see myself to be, any sense of self that I have, but most especially anything that I do that's of use to anybody, any use I have on this planet, any conscious choice I make to be of service is a result of Alcoholics Anonymous in my life. That's what AA has done for me. And that is my life. My life stems from that concept, and I don't even know it. Like Lewis was saying, it becomes, you practice these principles, and after a while, it becomes second nature to take the opposite action. And it's an amazing thing. It's a gift. So, that's a debt I'll never pay back. And when I say it's an honor and a privilege to be asked to participate in my program, especially to speak, I really, I mean that. It's not just lip service. Another thing my sponsor used to tell me was, he said that, the first 11 words of the 12th step are having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. And I loved hearing our friend, is it Mike, the newcomer? I don't see him now. Brian, read the chapter 5 tonight? Jack's gone. I loved hearing him read chapter 5 tonight because you could tell you're not that familiar with it, so you had to slow down a little bit and really read what was on the page. For a guy that's been around here 23 years and has heard that and read that book cover to cover 9 times, thank you. Because it reminded me of what it really says. When I have to stop for a second and think, we completely abandon ourselves to this simple program. And it says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. It's not just a result, it's the one thing we're working towards. And that's what my sponsor was there to explain to me. He said, the one thing we're working on is this spiritual change, this psychic change, this spiritual experience, this change in my perspective. So I'm here to talk about that a little bit. And here's a story that Lewis was going to tell you, but now I get to because he was polite enough not to blow all my jokes. But when I was 4 years sober, when I was 2 years sober, I got married, and when I was 4 years sober, I had our my son was born. And when I was 7 years sober, we divorced. And she went out due to this program, so I got custody of my kid. And every Saturday morning, we used to wake up together, and he loved to watch Looney Tunes, you know, Saturday morning cartoons, and I'd make pancakes. And his favorite was this Roadrunner cartoon. And I always tell this because if I don't finish the rest of my pitch, this is my story in a nutshell. And if you really want to know what I have to say about it or what the psychic change is, just remember this was the story. And it was I was watching it one morning with my friend Jimmy Woods on the phone, who was a single parent at the time, to his daughter. And he loved this Wile E. Coyote guy, you know, this Roadrunner cartoon, beep beep. And we were talking on the phone, and we decided that one of us must have written this thing, you know. That if you went back far enough in this Roadrunner cartoon, you'd find a place where maybe this Wile E. Coyote actually caught a Roadrunner. And he ate this bird, and it fixed him. I'm working with my friend Rich right now, and we were reading the doctor's opinion the other day, and it says, we're irritable, restless, and discontented until we can experience that sense of ease and comfort that comes at once just by taking a couple of drinks. You know, he'd take a shot of Jack from me, and it was like, go down burning, and it was like, yeah, immediately you feel that, you know. And I thought that's what it was like for this coyote when he ate this Roadrunner. He ate this Roadrunner, and it fixed him, man. It was like ease and comfort, and life was good, and he's going to spend the rest of his life now killing himself just to catch another Roadrunner. Gonna bite a Roadrunner. He'll buy Acme rockets. He'll climb on them. He'll strap himself to the side of these things, run himself into the side of mountains, fall. One of the greatest scenes I saw, they always had him pause before he'd fall, like 300 feet, you know. And there's this one scene at the end of one where he goes off the edge of this cliff, you know, and he's got bandages on his head. He's got a Band-Aid on his face, and he's looking down, and he's got 300 feet. He's gonna fall, and he's gonna die. But just think, you know, what was he risking it for? One more bite of Roadrunner, man. It would fix him, you know. Was worth it. And right before he falls, you know what he does? Smiles at the camera and whips out this sign that says genius, and then falls. Now, I don't know about you, but that's my story. That's it right there in a nutshell. I completely relate to that because it never dawned on me that it wasn't worth it, that it wasn't worth what I was going through. Lewis said in his travels this time, he had to go through Singapore. And I told him, I said, there was a news story this week of a lady hung in Singapore from Australia because she got busted with 2 ounces of heroin in their airport. And they hand out a piece of paper, and what does it say? It says, yeah, in essence, that's what it said. Yeah, it says you dealing drugs, any exchange of drugs in Singapore is punishable by death. And they tell you up front. They say, here it is. And she still got that 2 ounces of heroin because of the payoff. It was worth what she was risking. I don't know if she felt that way right before they hung her. But maybe, if it was me, I'd still be justifying it. I'd still have my genius sign before I fall that 300 feet. That's my number one problem, right there. This is a walk in the park compared to that condition. So, that's what I'm here to talk about. And the only thing that can change that is that what I don't realize, see, is this coyote does not know that it's a little bizarre that regardless of what else is going on that day, he always knows where the Roadrunner is. You know, he always knows where to find it. And it didn't matter what the hell else was going on during the day or what else was going on, I always knew where my next fix was coming from. And they explained to me when I went to my first meeting, and a guy came up to me, scared the hell out of me. He says, when's your next meeting? And I said, I didn't know. And he says, well, there's one 7:30 tonight. And he asked me if I could stay conscious between those two meetings. And that was a noon architects meeting. And I couldn't answer his question. And he took me out to coffee with 6 other guys from this program, and they sat me on the inside of the booth, and there was a sentinel of guys coming around until 7:30 that night. And they took me to that next meeting, and they said, you never leave a meeting. You don't know when your next meeting is. And you have phone numbers, and if the world and life gets in your face between those meetings, and you stay conscious between the meetings, and there's another rule after about 90 days that you can add to that list: don't fight. That's a little harder. But at least try not to, you know. And the world gets in my face, and that's where it begins. It begins right there. And if I do those two things, if I stay conscious and try to not fight, I will run into everything that I cannot accept in life. And through not accepting it, I will run into my first step, which will take me through the next 11, which is what saves my life. I work these steps based on the requirement to do so, which is a bottom, and I will bottom out. And what the steps are about is exactly what Lewis was saying. It's about me finding out that anytime I'm off center, it's not your fault. It's a choice I've made. It's a perspective I have. And that leads me to a psychic change. It leads me to a change in my perspective, which is what is my number one thing today, which takes me to that 12th step, which is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps. It's the only thing I'm working for. I'm from Beaumont, Texas originally. Okay, now I hate speaker meetings, so I'll make this as painless as possible. I'm from Beaumont, Texas, and I'm not very good at them either. You guys are already 1,000 times better than I ever was at a speaker meeting. Because I'd be shuffling around and getting up and going to the back and going on, so I understand. Beaumont, Texas is 90 miles east of Houston. It's about 5 miles west of Louisiana. Significance of that is that when I was a kid in Texas, 1967, I was 14 years old. That makes me 52, I think, so you don't have to think about it. And I was 14, 1967, and I could get a driver's license. It was the last year in Texas you could get your driver's license when you were 14 years old. It was 67. And my dad had given me this old 58 Chevy Delray. It was his old car. It was a 6-cylinder with 3-speed on a column, you know, and there were like 6 other older guys 16 to 18 years old. They were older than me, and I got to run with them because I had a car, and they didn't have a car. We called ourselves the Magnificent Seven. And we'd put as much money together as we could, and the thing in Louisiana was you couldn't drive till you're 18, but you could drink at 18. Now in Texas, you could drive at 14, but you couldn't drink till you're 21. So if you're old enough to drive in Louisiana, they sell you the booze. And we drive 5 miles over the state line. We go to this Jack's Packet liquor store in Benton, Louisiana. It was the first exit off Highway 90. And I remember it like it was yesterday, like it was my first road runner, you know, like it was a spiritual experience. See, the thing about my sponsor explained to me, he said, having had a spiritual experience as the result of these steps, that's what I crave anyway. I crave a spiritual experience. That's why I'm here. You know, that's why I loved to drink and use, because it changed my perspective. I crave that. It's always going to be number one for me, because I cannot deal with the life in my face. So we would go over there, and I remember this like it was yesterday. It would be this old gravel shell driveway. We'd drive up back. There was a drive-up window, and there was a guy with must have weighed about 300 pounds with a cigar hanging out of his mouth, and he'd ask us what we'd want, and we'd buy a case of long neck Pearl beer, and we bought this Boone's Farm strawberry wine, Boone's Farm apple wine. And there's another one of my jokes that Lewis always loved to kid me about is, but it's true. For $1.59, you could get a gallon bottle of Bally High wine. Now, I don't know if anybody here has ever seen Bally High wine, But to a 14-year-old, that looks like Bugs Bunny Day, man. It looks like Disneyland, you know. It's got this little Hawaiian girl on the label, and she be dancing a hula, you know. It was sexy, man. $1.59 for this whole gallon of Bali High wine, which I say they call it that because you drink that bottle. That's how you say, I'm very high. I am Bali High, you know. You want to be Bali High? I love Bali High. And I figured it was a marketing thing or some guy that had just drank a bottle trying to spell what he was. But I remember that, like I said, I remember like it was yesterday because of what it did for me. My sponsor said I used not to care what it did to me. Didn't matter what it did to me because of what it did for me. Asked that lady in Singapore. Didn't matter what it did to her because of what that 2 ounces would have done for her. It was worth the risk. Didn't matter I'd fall 300 feet off a cliff because of what it would have done for me if I had caught that thing. And I loved what it did for me. I fell in love with it, and all of a sudden I realized how people can walk through life now because my volume knob's too high. I feel too much. I am not the average bear. I am bodily and mentally different than my fellows. When I have that sense of ease and comfort, that becomes what everything in life is about. I can't just accept it and say, okay, now I'm back to my life again. No, it changes everything. It's that spiritual experience I was looking for. Problem with drugs and alcohol is they work less and less and less over the years. When I was 19, I went to New York City looking for bigger and better highs. I got a job driving cab there in the South Bronx at Bell Garage. I was dealing drugs at night out of Central Park, out of the back of this Checker Marathon cab. I had this whole thing set up. I'm from the Brady Bunch. My parents went to the same church, and my dad was a professor at the university. My sister was a valedictorian of her high school. They're still wondering what the hell happened to me. Nobody knows, and I always felt like they were strangers. I never related to those people, never understood them, never wanted to know them, didn't feel like I knew them. When I was 21, my dad died. When I was 23, my sister had had been married. She was in Germany on a scholarship and had a baby boy. And when he was 2, when I was 25, she was 31. She got a type C hepatitis, and he was the only contact with my family I had. And she went in and out of a coma for about 9 months and had an aneurysm and died. And I went home second time when I was 25, watched my mother bury her. I held her son in my arms and swore off God. I decided if there was a God at that point, I wanted nothing to do with him, because if anybody was supposed to be dead, it was me and not her. And that was right before 1980. When I came to one morning, by this time, that's what I'm doing. I'm coming to, because I just want out. I just want out. Whatever you got that works to get me out. Looking for that change, that something to turn the switch off. And I came to one morning, I used to have this trick. I was a blackout drinker. Every time I drank, I would lose 3 and 4 days of my life. And if you find a newsstand, you can look at the newspaper. It'll tell you what day it is and where you are. And those are 2 critical things if you're a blackout drinker, because you come to, you won't know. And there was a picture of Richard Pryor. This is a timely story, being that he's just passed, but it was a picture of Richard Pryor running down Ventura Boulevard on fire on the front page of the New York Times, 1980. And I thought, if you're Wile E. Coyote, that looks like a great idea. I thought, wow, what's he found? There's the spiritual experience, I'm going to go to California. So I came out here in 1980. I got a job making a lot of money in a little bit of time. In 1982, November of 1982, a week before Thanksgiving, was the last blackout I remember going into. A buddy of mine was coming over. We were getting ready to go to a party. I went to pour the gin. I was staying with a girlfriend. All she had to drink was this gin. I hated gin. And I don't even remember taking the first drink. Next thing I know, that was a Thursday. Next thing I know, it was Monday morning. I was lying face down in the southeast corner of Hollywood and Vine. My face was stuck to the sidewalk. My hand still has a scar on it where it was stuck. And people were walking over me and looking at me like I used to look at the bums on the subway in New York. And I didn't know how I had gotten there. And I don't even remember taking the first drink before that blackout. What a drag, you know? I mean, when you black out to the point that you don't even remember getting high. And that was the beginning of the bottom for me. I came to that morning on that corner. There was a novelty shop there. It's still there. I drive by it. And they used to have a payphone that hung out front. And I had 37 cents on me in this old Army jacket. And I had a piece of torn off legal paper. It said Michael. And he had a phone number. And I called that phone number and I remembered this guy. I used to drink with this guy years before. And I had seen him. I vaguely remembered. I'd seen him 3 or 4 months before at a party at a bar. And he'd been drinking this Perrier. And I said, man, let me buy you a drink. You don't have to drink this Perrier. And he said, no. He said, I hadn't had a drink in a year and a half. And I thought, that's terrible, man. You know, let me get you a drink. You don't have to do that to yourself, you know. He said, no. He said, I've been going to AA. Well, I guess that was the end of that conversation that night. So what I did was he had, somewhere in that blackout that night, I don't remember it, he had given me this phone number. And I had it on me that morning, so you think about giving a newcomer your phone number, no telling when it's going to show up or with who or where or how. But I had it on me that morning, and I called him up, and he right away recognized who I was, knew who I was. And he says, what's up? And I said, Michael, I really need a drink right now, but I don't want to get drunk today. And I remember saying that to him real clear without even thinking. And it was almost like I jumped outside myself. It's almost like for a brief second. And I heard Stuart talking at the break about having a dream about seeing himself in a mirror. It was like somebody had stuck that mirror up that morning. And I could see myself for a brief moment. And I knew that I had a problem. I thought, this is a problem. You know, it's like, I don't want to get drunk, but I need a drink. You know, it's like, how am I going to deal with this? And he said, where are you? And what must have been about 20 minutes, but felt like 2, he comes pulling up in his car and he throws me in. We go to our first meeting. It was an Architects of Adversity meeting at noon on a Monday over in West Hollywood. Now, I thought this guy must be the president of AA. If you want to get some attention, show up looking like I looked that morning and make sure everybody knows it's your first AA meeting. And go with a regular member. Because I tell you, like I say, I felt like a dog on a freeway. Now, there's a thing about having that kind of terror going on. When you feel that vulnerable, when you feel that terrified, you look people straight in the eye because you're scared of everything. You figure the whole world's all out to get you. So if somebody didn't shoot straight, you know right away. And these people were looking at me and they were saying things like, nice to meet you. We're friends with, we know Michael. We love Michael. And I'd look at him and I'd watch them greet him, my friend Michael that I was there with. I watched them greet him. And I couldn't shoot a hole, and everybody seemed to be telling the truth. You know, they did seem to be glad I was there, which was bizarre to me. You know, I'm a very vain person, and I don't even, you know, I was still hungover at that meeting. They said, your friend Michael sits here, why don't you sit there? And they asked me what I wanted in my coffee. And they said, you like cream in your coffee? And I went, yeah. And then they brought me this cup of coffee. I remember asking my friend Michael, I said, listen, man, I don't know how you're supposed to, could you spot me this cup of coffee? Because I don't, you know, I had 37 cents on me that morning. I used 25 of it to call you. And he said, no, it's for free. I said, don't worry. He said, you know, I told him he could have taken me for the next 2 years by saying I was just buying my coffee at AA meetings. But I was really impressed. I didn't even realize it at the time. But what was happening to me was I was looking at this that was going on around me, and it was like I was looking for, the other shoe to drop. And these people were being sincere, and they would say things like, we were glad you're here. And when's your next meeting? And come back. And I remember I went to a meeting that night, and I told you that story about they took me out to coffee, and the next day I remember going to my second architect's meeting. That night I'd gone to a meeting with my friend Michael, and I passed out on his couch, and the next Tuesday, he woke me up, and he said, we're going back to another one of those architects meetings. And I saw some of the same people. Now, if you're new, what I'm going to tell you is that this is all hindsight. It took me 2.5, 3 years to realize what had happened to me. It's hindsight. And in hindsight, I got 20/20 vision. I was not clear what was happening that day. I just knew that there was something significant changing in my perspective. And I didn't realize it for months later. But I look back now, and with hindsight, I can tell you accurately what was going on. And what I realized was that when I went to that second architects meeting, I had stayed conscious between the first two. They had said, don't leave a meeting without knowing when your next one is. Stay conscious between the meetings. Well, I guess when I went to that second one, I must have looked like I cleaned up a little bit, because these people remembered me. They knew who I was. It was the same people at the door. They were saying, we're glad you're here. One guy even remembered what I drank in my coffee because he knew my friend Michael. And what it did was I looked back and I realized it gave me a sense of self-esteem. It gave me a sense of integrity. It gave me a sense of something of service in my life. And that's the way this thing has worked for me ever since. In essence, it's like the only truth I had when I first got here was what I stole from these meetings, which were based on an integrity that I couldn't get in the real world. Lewis talked a little bit about a higher power. The best thing I'd say about God when I got here was it was dog spelled backwards. I wanted nothing to do with God. I was angry with God, and I felt if there was one, it made no sense to me about the things that had happened in my life, and I wanted nothing to do with it. But I did like what I was getting from these meetings. And I thoroughly hit a bottom. And I could think through for a little while. I could think through that first drink and what it would do for me and where it would end up. By the time I had 90 days sobriety, first off, I want to say, it took me, I remember, I'll tell you the story real quick. And it's kind of the story of my third step, and then I'll be done. I had 90 days sobriety, and there was this guy named Irv Nemi that used to go to this Wednesday noon meeting over at Yucca and Gower. And he was there every Wednesday at 12 o'clock, and it was kind of known as Irv's meeting. Now, Irv Nemi was a guy that I knew who had been pointed out to me by other guys, and he had over 30 years of sobriety. And he sat on the first seat in the front of this room of maybe 300 people. This noon meeting at Yucca on Wednesdays back then must have had 300-400 people every Wednesday show up. It was this huge meeting, and they gave chips there. And I had been told by the guys I was getting sober with that I had to go and take a 90-day chip. And I had to get there early enough to save his seat. And Irv always sat on the first seat on the left, and he had over 30 years of sobriety. And I, at the time, remember thinking that just got to be impossible. It's like this guy's too old to have ever really, who the hell, 30 years? Who could even imagine that? I had 90 days. And I knew guys that knew Irv. I'd never talked to Irv, didn't want anything to do with him. But I got to that meeting early that day to save his seat to take this 90-day chip, and he was walking one way and I was walking the other, and he stops and he looks at me and he says, "Hey, how you doing?" And I right away recognized the fact that he was actually asking me how I was doing through recognition. In other words, he actually saw me, recognized me, and asked me how I was doing. Now I thought, my God, if Irv Nemi asked me how I'm doing, I got to tell him, because this guy is like over 30 years sober and probably, I got to tell him. And it was kind of like what I was talking about from what I had gotten from these meetings. It just, if nothing else, for the free coffee, I was willing to respect you a little bit. You know what I mean? So I said, well, geez, and this thing's about rigorous honesty, so I'm going to tell him the truth. So I looked at him and I said, wow, I guess he really wants to know. And I thought, okay. I said, well, I'm not doing too good. And he said, excuse me? And I said, I'm not doing very good. I'm pathetic, man. I've been going to these meetings for 90 days and nothing's really getting any better. I'm staying on this friend's couch. I've been staying there ever since I called him up the first day. They keep telling me to hang in there and go to these stupid meetings, and I can't get a job. I used to bartend and deal drugs. I can't do that anymore. I said, I'm in thousands of dollars worth of debt to the wrong kind of people, let me tell you. These people don't want to hear from me except for the money I owe them. I had a car. I can't find my car. It took me 6 months to find my car. I had left the keys at my girlfriend's house, and she wouldn't pick up the phone anyway, so even if I found the car, I couldn't drive it because I didn't have keys for it. I ended up claiming it 6 months later in the impound yard because I couldn't remember where I'd left my car. And I said, life's pretty pathetic right now. I'm just going to these stupid meetings. Nothing's getting any better. And I thought to myself, now this guy's in my face. He asked me how I'm doing. And I said, my ass is falling off. I'm pathetic. How are you? Well, it was like he didn't even look at me. He's looking past me in the back of the room. He says, that guy back there in the back of the room? And I turned and I looked and I went, no, who's that? He says, that guy's name is Jeff. Now, back then they used to smoke in meetings. And this guy had the ashtray commitment. And that means he had a stack of these aluminum ashtrays about 2 feet high. He was trying to balance and not drop and put them out on the tables. He says, why don't you go help Jeff with them ashtrays? We got about 5 minutes before this meeting starts. Why don't you give him a hand? Now let's review this for a second. I'm thinking I'm already pretty uptight and in the middle of the center stage. Got to this meeting early, which was difficult for me to do back then. It's a new meeting, for God's sake. That's still morning for a newcomer. I got there early. I see this guy. He finally, this old timer says hi to me. I think I'm getting some inroads in this program. He asked me how I'm doing. I'm as rigorously honest as I can be, which was not easy for me to do. I tell him the truth, pour my heart out, and he's telling me to put ashtrays out. I'm going, what is this? I felt like breaking his nose, But here's the story. When I look back with hindsight, the miracle is you could take a guy like me with my personality, my belligerence, my attitude. I had such huge attitude, huge ego. And here's this little old guy, Irv Nemi, and anybody that knows him knows that he was like, and he's telling me to put these ashtrays out, and it didn't occur to me for 1 second that anybody around me wouldn't see me do exactly what Irv was asking me to do because of who he was to you, and you had set him up to be that person to me. The fact that you could have commanded some kind of respect, some kind of sacrificing of attitude in a guy like me with 90 days. I look back and I see what a miracle that is, because there's no way anybody standing around there that heard that conversation wasn't going to watch me go back and find out where them ashtrays are, because that's what I was got to do. It's not what I felt like doing, and I was mad at this guy. I didn't ever want to see him again in my life, but that's what I had to do. So I turned around, I went back, and I said, I'm supposed to help you with these stupid ashtrays. Where are they? He says, they're back in the kitchen. So I went back in the kitchen to get some ashtrays, and there was a guy back there with this army jacket. He had a DUNCAN butterfly yo-yo, purple DUNCAN butterfly yo-yo. Now, the significance of that is when I was 12 years old in Beaumont, Texas, I won a Briggs & Stratton mini bike doing a yo-yo trick called Walk the Dog, further than any other kid my age range, and I hadn't seen a yo-yo in 20 years. And this guy could barely make it go up and down. That'll break your heart, man, if you know how to do a yo-yo. And I was sitting there, and it was a Duncan Butterfly purple. I mean, those were hard to come by. He had no idea what he had in his hand. I went up to him, I said, "Where'd you get this yo-yo?" I said, "This is amazing," because it was really, a purple Duncan Butterfly was hard to come by. He said, "I don't know." He said, "My kid got it or something." I said, "Man, you can't even make that thing go up and down." I said, "Let me play with this yo-yo." He said, "Excuse me?" I said, "Let's go out in the courtyard, I want to show you." He gave me this yo-yo. It was like riding a bike I'd never forgotten. I'm doing around the worlds, rock the cradle. I could do a Star of Texas, make it spin and catch it. Doing walk the dog. He's looking at me going, "Unbelievable. Where'd you learn how to do that?" And I said, "You know, when I was a kid," you know. He said, "I hadn't seen one of these in 20 years. He said, 'My name's Bill.' I said, 'Well, nice to meet you. I'm Frank.' He said, 'How you doing?' I said, 'Well, I'm glad you asked.' I'm pathetic, you know. My ass is falling off, you know. I can't make any money. I used to bartend. I gave him my tale of woe. I said, 'You know Irv?' He says, 'Everybody knows Irv.' I said, 'Well, he didn't care.' I told him about it. He didn't care anything. He says, 'Well, what'd you used to do?' Make a long story short, I told him a little bit about what I used to do. He gives me his business card. I called him that afternoon. I went to work for him the next day. Worked for him for a year and a half, met my next business partner, which led me to publishing my first book. It took me getting a 9-month chip at the same meeting for one of the guys I was hanging with, like Lewis, to turn to me and say, "You realize you wouldn't have this job if you hadn't gone to put out them ashtrays." So what did Irv know? What did Irv know? And it made me go back and look at that. Now, the only thing this guy knew was that if one of you crazy newcomers tonight come up to me and ask me or tell me your story of woe, I'll want to get you out of my face too, you know. So all I'm going to do is all Irv was doing was looking and seeing, who am I here for and what are they trying to get me to understand? And he didn't know what to do. He's probably terrified. This guy's in his face telling him this story. But he's looking in the back of the room and he sees a guy almost dropping ashtrays and he surrenders to that moment and he says, "Why don't you go give him a hand?" That's what we learned to do here. And that's a surrender. My sponsor used to say, if I've turned it over, if I've really surrendered it and I know how it's going to turn out, I hadn't turned it over. If I've turned it over, I don't have a clue how it's going to turn out. So all I was doing was just looking in that moment, seeing who am I here for, what are they trying to get me to understand. That'll keep me conscious. That'll keep me conscious to the next second, to the next second, to my next meeting, between the meetings. Go do that, let the river take its course, and the next thing you know, I had a job that supported me and my son and raised him, and to this day, puts a roof over my head. And it wasn't anything I could have come up with on my own. And it's really been like that. It really is like that. And the more I practice these principles, the more that kind of providence and magic and that energy, that current in the river, whatever that flow is that I know is there and is something I can align myself with, that's become my higher power. That's become what's bigger than me. And the only way I can get back to it is to remember the number one thing. Number one thing. That is the number one thing. You know, is that spiritual experience, that change in perspective. So, you know, when Wiley gets that, he stops chasing roadrunners. Him and a roadrunner go walk off in the sunset, you know, happily ever after. Great end of the story. Anyway, I had a great time. I always love speaking, and hope you guys have a good week and a happy holiday. Be safe. Don't drink. Keep coming back.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.